whole snow economy is at stake.
Winter is warming 3 times faster than summer.
Long-term trends show snowfall has been declining for decades.
Winter temperatures for Western Mass are nearly 4 degrees higher than 50 years ago, potentially cutting the ski season in half by 2050.
Locals here are worried.
And nationwide, winter businesses make up $20 billion industry, the bulk of that spending coming from ski resorts.
It's just one of the 45 American ski areas to shut down in the last 20 years.
Half of the 103 resorts in the Northeast will likely not be able to stay open, and that's in the next 30 years.
The impact of climate change on the ski industry is like a canary in a coal mine.
Snow is important to our success, but so are the many efforts that ski areas have taken to adapt to a changing climate and improve their resiliency for the future.
Athletes faced fog, rain, and temperatures in the 60s. Research predicts that could become the new reality at ski resorts around the world. Winter sports could be doomed.
Will this be the end?
You seem like such a minuscule human being in the world, but when you multiply it by hundreds of thousands of people doing those same things, we can make an impact. It's almost too late, many people argue, but we could try our best and might as well give it a try.
From what I've seen over the years in the ski industry, in terms of impacts of climate change, I think there's a lot of indirect impacts, and I think we have to be really careful of not confusing weather and climate. So, you know, there have always been low snow years throughout the history of the ski industry in this country. We have to remember that. You know, it's easy to jump on the like, oh, well, look at this year. I mean, this year's been a really warm winter. But we have to remember that that's happened historically. The bigger concern, I think, is the climate change.
We're now finally getting to a point where we're able to plan for the future. We just have to keep showing the examples of let's all lower our carbon footprints, because if we do that, there's a chance to slow that cycle down and keep our winters cold.
This is the shift that hasn't happened, that will happen, is when it becomes economically profitable. You know, I mean, it's happening, but when green becomes really cool, you know, and becomes an industry sort of favorite thing, then we're going to see some big changes, you know. And I think it's happening. It's a slow boil.
A lot of times people will see big development, big growth, and they think, oh, there they are using more energy. Well, indirectly, by the way we're approaching it, we should be using collectively less energy. Well, we're actually lowering our carbon footprint by doing all this and modernizing our base facilities so we can be here for years to come.
There's 2 things we could do. You can adapt or mitigate, and mitigating is not really an option at this point. The trajectory of warming temperatures is going to happen, it's evident. So the next best thing we could do is adapt and overcome and make changes in the ski industry, knowing that it's only going to get warmer from here.
We can all change and have an impact, but I think really it's the big guys that need to lead with this to have large-scale impacts.
At UNH, we're super lucky to have access to the White Mountains, and the White Mountains aren't going to be white in a few years. Everyone wants revolution, but nobody wants change. My name is Jack Martin. I'm a junior here at UNH. I'm a marketing and sustainability major. I'm the president of the Ski and Board Club on campus. We're a campus recreation club sport, and we have 220 members, so we're the biggest sports club on campus. The amount of kids at UNH that want to have access to going to the mountains has increased to the point where we've had to put a capacity on our club just because it's a lot for us student volunteers to deal with. You will find, though, that students will join the club, but they won't be interested because there's no snow on UNH campus, so they don't think there's snow in the mountains. That's a really hard thing for students to grasp, that there's always going to be snow as long as there's freezing temperatures for them to make snow. And what we see on UNH campus, being 20 minutes away from the ocean, people don't realize that it's almost a different climate pattern up in the mountains. So we're lucky that we could drive north and get to snow, but it's not always the way that students think.
If you live in New Jersey, you just know that you're probably not going to have as much skiing as you maybe used to have, and same for West Virginia and North Carolina, and you're just going to change where you ski. And I think the consensus is like the moisture's not going to go away, the temperature's just going to start moving a little farther north. I mean, it's true right now, a season like this, there's no snow down in Boston and people are a little hesitant to go up north because it's not in their backyard. And there's a lot of evidence about that phenomena. But it's a shame because it's white up there. I mean, it's full on. And I know that's one of the biggest challenges of the mountains up north, is sort of like getting the word out. People have a tendency to forget that it's there. I love how it's, if you turn on the radio, there's almost every channel has a snow report. It's part of the culture in New England, which helps a lot. But it's still hard to message, to people, and then to motivate.
I think the no snow in your backyard is something that the ski industry talks about a lot. It's definitely a factor. If it's 6 inches of snow down in the Boston area, people get excited and they want to go skiing, and then they come up and they see that we completely covered in snow and they have a great time. What's changed, I think, over the last 30 years is people are educated, and they're with webcams, live videos, everything we've been doing, we're connected to our consumers a lot better than we used to be. Back in the day, they'd listen to a radio ad or see a billboard and they'd say, well, there's probably no snow up there. Well, now they can go right online, they can see that there's snow. It still is a factor if it doesn't snow down south, but people also know mountains are aggressively making snow now versus 30 years ago.
I think what we will be more reliant on in the future is technology and snowmaking. That's something that is progressing.
After the Fairbanks purchased Cranmore in 2010, they put a lot of money into the snowmaking system, which got us more sustainable from a mountain standpoint. In 2016, we broke ground on our new base area development, which is replacing all the old buildings, many of which were here from the 1940s, 1950s. It's going to be a combination residential condominium with ski area, base lodge. Sometimes people think of ski resorts as, wow, they're just making tons of money up there. Well, the costs are so high to run ski resorts. There's always a balance. So this investment is really important for our future, because if we can bring our costs and our energy consumption down while growing at the same time, it's like the snow guns. If we can find a snow gun that can make more snow in a shorter period of time and use less energy, that's fantastic. And luckily we've been taking advantage of a lot of those things.
I've personally worked as a ski instructor, as well as helping out with a ski patrol program in Connecticut, and we've seen people get laid off because the winters were bad. There weren't enough people coming wanting to learn how to ski. The better instructors were left to teach, and if you were a seasonal employee being paid part-time, you were no longer seen as someone who was needed.
From what I've seen over the years in the ski industry, in terms of impacts of climate change, I think there's a lot of indirect impacts, and I think we have to be really careful of not confusing weather and climate. So, there have always been low snow years throughout the history of the ski industry in this country. We have to remember that. It's easy to jump on the oh, well, look at this year. I mean, this year's been a really warm winter. But we have to remember that that's happened historically. The bigger concern, I think, is the climate change. Precipitation is still coming, but the temperatures are shifting a little later. That's just anecdotal, but I've noticed that part.
I think we're going to have shorter winters. We're going to have to go north for more snow. Connecticut, where I'm from, for example, we have a ski mountain there, and I don't think that ski mountain's going to exist for more than 5 years. Warmer temperatures are creeping up on us. So for people who are in southern New England, skiing as we know it isn't going to exist.
Jiminy Peak in Western Mass has this exact same model and have been very successful following it. I think the real cool thing for Cranmore is we're doing our development 20 years later than Jiminy, so we're able to introduce things like the heat pumps, the Tesla stations, and do some more efficient things with insulation and heating. Our buildings are going to be so much more efficient, and our carbon footprint is going to be lowered greatly by doing this development. Jiminy Peak, who's our sister ski area, they are doing a great job promoting it as part of their whole persona, because they're 100% off the grid. I mean, I would love to say I'm 100% off the grid, which I'm not, but that's a goal that we hope to be 100% off the grid someday and follow in their footsteps.
It's a tough one to ask people to change the way they live and the way they travel, and I think that's never going to be a popular solution. It's really encouraging to see some of the resorts like Aspen and locally like Cranmore and some of these places that are stepping it up and doing things like Cranmore has one of the only hybrid groomers in the country. Those kinds of developments and having really efficient snowmaking and all that, that's awesome.
There is a lot of work going on, not just at Cranmore, but at other ski areas to try to keep winter alive and keep the snow on the slopes, and I think the bar gets raised every year.
I think when you step back, like the impact that ski areas are having on climate change is pretty minuscule compared to things like transportation and the big energy pieces. That's more about systems. It's a systems change that has to happen, and how we can be, as skiers, I think we can be advocates. We're not everybody. It's got to be like an everybody thing to really make a difference, but I think we can do our part. I think what is interesting is that a lot of the conglomerates and a lot of the big players have the potential to impact and influence change.
People like to read up on it, and again, they're on a ski vacation, but also to learn about how this business is introducing wind and solar and using sustainability practices. Again, they might carry that back to their own businesses or their own way of being at their homes. The real super positive to it as well is it makes good business sense half the time too to do these things. I mean, it may be a little bit more expensive to put that heat pump system in, but the long-term savings are really advantageous, and our guests are expecting that kind of progressive thinking. So we find it's a win-win.
The risk for, so let's say my kids, or I don't know, college students. Are college students going to see a shift moving forward, in terms of affordability, access? On one hand, I want to say, yeah, it's going to get more expensive. Day passes are going up. It's getting a lot harder to go on vacation, those kinds of things. But at the same time, some of these conglomerate moves have, if you play the cards right, you can get a season pass for $900 that gets you access to a lot of places. And so on some level, it's playing to being more affordable.
The primary revenue that's generated for ski resorts is through seasons pass sales at the beginning of the season. Let's use Loon Mountain, for example. Loon's probably the most popular mountain for the UNH students. So if Loon Mountain has a bad season, that's going to reflect in the following season's pass sales. They're not going to sell as much. They're going to say, hey, Loon didn't have a good season. I'm going to get a pass to a different mountain. I'm going to go get a pass to Jay Peak, because that's more north, it's almost on the Canada border, and I want something that has more snow. Loon will then suffer because of their prior season, and another mountain might gain revenue, but it's only going to go further up and up and up as temperatures begin to increase. So there's definitely a huge risk every season for a mountain to perform knowing that their experience that year is going to affect the season's pass sales the following year.
When you see the economy good like it is now, you see the ski industry doing good. I mean, it's expensive, you know, so it's right now, from all projections, the ski industry is in a good place right now. And now how that's related to climate change, the things I've seen that have changed over the years are, especially in New England, but throughout the country, the need for snowmaking, the tendency for the season to start later. I have seen that trend pretty consistently. The other place I've noticed it is in Nordic skiing. So Nordic areas now, it used to be really rare for a Nordic area to have snowmaking. And now it's becoming pretty standard, even for here in New England, for Nordic areas to have snowmaking.
If they have better snowmaking technology, that's an expense for them. That expense needs to be paid for, and they need to sell more passes, sell more expensive passes to make sure that happens. Skiing is just already super expensive. To have to pay hundreds of dollars for a single day, the sport's not going to grow that way. You need it to be affordable, and the future of the sport is reliant on people having access to the sport. And with high costs, you're not going to be able to have that access. So we're almost digging ourselves a hole by investing in these higher technologies, and I don't even know how it's going to turn out, but I'm terrified.
We haven't seen a decline in business. The whole growth of skiing has been fairly flat to small growth over the last, say, 10 years. And it's concerning. The whole ski industry talks about it because we're trying to grow a new generation of skiers. And I think the biggest conflict is less the snow on the mountain and more that there's just so many more things for people to do today.
You have these family mountains, and the caveat is at those mountains you can't get the $200 season pass like you used to be able to get. The recreational, affordable contingent has to be part of the conversation. If it's just the wealthy, it's super volatile.
Protect Our Winters is a winter snow sport advocacy group. More recently, they've been branching out and not only focusing on winter sports, but all forms of outdoor recreation, making sure that we have access to these recreational environments, whether it be the mountains, whether it be hiking trails. Their mission is to make sure those exist for future generations. They do a phenomenal job with it, and they're on the leading end of climate change science. If anyone's looking to make an impact, make any change at all, I think the best thing you could do is go to their website and educate yourself. Educating yourself, being aware of the issues, how you can help, voting. If you want to donate, you could donate. But I think the biggest thing is being aware, spreading that education, telling your friends about it, the guy on the ski lift about it who doesn't believe in climate change, tell everyone, because this needs to be heard. I think the biggest thing that we could do is just be involved, make sure we're making the right choices. There's been a huge increase in backcountry skiing, so using uphill access, human-powered skiing to then ski downhill. My season this year, I was extremely happy to say that I had more backcountry, human-powered ski days than riding a lift. And I think that's going to be a shift that you see as that portion of the sport, which is the fastest growing portion of the sport, becomes more affordable.
I think the whole ski mountaineering thing, having skins and being able to walk up the mountain, that's become a growing segment. It's like 15% now of the industry, I believe, according to the last sales of uphill travel. So it's big. It's a big part of what is happening out there now.
The biggest thing that you could do is just make changes in your lifestyle. The big thing that you learn about with Protect Our Winters and trying to promote change in a positive way is everyone wants revolution, but nobody wants change. Just to implement small things in your lifestyle, whether it be carpooling, whether it be walking to class versus taking a moped.
I think things like vehicles are a big part of our guests' need here because we don't have public transportation to come to the area, so they do rely on their cars. We always encourage carpooling. We added 2 Tesla charge stations a couple of years ago, and we're working on regular charge stations to encourage people to invest in electric cars because obviously that's a green approach to things.
Tesla's killing it. And that's a great example. It takes a private, wealthy individual to come in and single-handedly change the way people, get from point A to B. And I think the same thing can happen in the ski industry. And it is happening to a certain extent. I think UNH is a relatively green school, but there's some interesting research as well. So Elizabeth Burkowski, one of our colleagues here, is one of the premier climate change ski industry researchers in the country. And we're so lucky to have her here. She and a group called Protect Our Winters. So that piece is tied pretty closely to UNH.
We have Elizabeth Burkowski, who's the lead scientist for Protect Our Winters. We have Cameron Wake, who's a phenomenal climatologist as well as a winter mountaineer. And their mission is to take in information themselves, teach it to students, and make sure everyone's getting the most up-to-date information that is as effective as possible in making sure we can make a change here. You have the yin and yang of climate. So I think UNH is really an epicenter for climate change studies.
Ski New Hampshire is a good resource. They've been working actually with Plymouth State. They do economic impact studies on the ski industry and the snowmobile industry. And that stuff, that kind of research is really valuable to get out there.
I'm involved with Ski New Hampshire, which is 17 ski resorts all over the state that work together. I'm on the environmental committee where we're talking about working together to actually establish grades for every ski area on what commitment you're doing for conservation and for green energy. It's a good way for us all to work together, share best practices, and get those ideas out. And again, we're linked to millions of people that are coming skiing in the White Mountains and in New Hampshire. So if we can have an impact on them with some examples like we've set, then hopefully that's going to populate out.
Tourism relies on it, people rely on it for their sanity, and winter is something that's normal to New Englanders, and you take winter away and it's not going to be like New England.
Tourism is the #2 industry in the state behind manufacturing, and the ski industry is a big part of that. So it makes sense.
I think the consumer is concerned about the weather. They want to see their mountains stay white. We want to remain the White Mountains, but they also know that the ski areas are doing their part. We just have to keep showing the examples of let's all lower our carbon footprints, because if we do that, there's a chance to slow that cycle down and keep our winters cold.
We need to adapt. We need to do everything we can, because even if we do everything we can, chances are it still won't be enough. And it's really sad to be thinking that way, but if you listen to all climatologists, they all believe the same thing. I think the biggest thing that everyone needs to know is it's already too late.
The challenging winters are becoming more mainstream, and I think the ski industry as a whole is accepting that and trying to do their part to lower the carbon footprint and at the same time keep winters alive.